Majority Report, where you molded your thoughts on. TMBS, you would talk that talk. Always kind, looking out for the underdog. Fought for workers every day, punching the card. You a star legend, an icon for us. We gon' fight for what's just. You keep the light on us, from flesh to stardust. We blessed to know you, dude. Every day you served us with some good soul food. International, cosmopolitan. You left so abruptly, it's hard to process it. Man, we shook as ever. P.S. Thanks for the book. It's Michael Brooks forever.
Guys, stay safe, stay well, be kind to yourselves and others, and also realize that effort starts over each day.
So watch TMBS, chop it up with Cornel West, and I say, man, I'm gonna miss Michael. And yeah, the grief, it stings. Open your heart and sing. Rest in peace, King.
All right, well, this is episode 1 of The Brief and Wondrous Life of Michael Brooks. My name is Lisha Brooks, and my older brother died quite unexpectedly this summer. He had a very large blood clot that had formed in his body, and he was unaware of it, and it traveled to his heart and very suddenly killed him. And Michael was just at the beginning of just really taking off in his work, and it's just so horrible that his life was cut short. I don't think I'll ever find anything good about it. There's really no silver lining here, but I'm happy to have this project. I've said this a couple times now, but I also work in entertainment, and Michael and I always planned on collaborating, and this definitely feels like my way of getting to collaborate with my brother. So I plan on interviewing a lot of family members, family friends, friends of Michael's, people he worked with, people he knew. But I thought for the first episode, we really ought to hear from Michael. And in the summer of 2017, I actually recorded about an hour and a half long conversation with Michael. And it was all about his childhood and his life and his education and what brought him to where he was then, which was he was co-hosting on the Majority Report, and he had his own show, Two Dope Boys. But it was before he had created the Michael Brooks Show, or TMBS. And he had been really pushing me to start a podcast. I had been nannying in Los Angeles, and I had finally quit, and I was, getting some commercial acting work and still working odd jobs. And he was like, you just have to start a podcast. You have to start a podcast. And even then, it was 2017. So it was before like 1 in 3 citizens had a podcast, or whatever the statistic is. But even then, it was already like everyone had a podcast. And I wanted to be very clever and come up with, an interesting angle. And so I had this idea. I had been listening to an interview with a famous actor, and he had been talking about his childhood, and his parents had raised him, kind of in a cult. And he was really critical of his parents and kind of, harsh about his upbringing. And I thought like, it'd be interesting if now the next, segment was one of the parents talking about their perspective on why they lived in the cult and how things were at that time. And so I came up with this concept of interviewing someone who is in media or entertainment, and then one of their parents. And the idea is that Michael and my dad would essentially be the first episode. And Michael was actually really a good sport about being pretty transparent and pretty vulnerable and honest. But a lot of the other people I lined up to interview, like, I don't know, we'll make something up. Like they say their father had a second family, and that was something I knew. They'd be like, oh yeah, I'm totally game. Me and my mom will talk. We're really excited. And then it'd be like, oh, but don't mention my dad, or, whatever. It was always that. It was like, I'd have kind of like interesting story to tell. I'd be all excited. Everyone would be game. And then I'd like show up to record, and they'd be like, yep, but don't talk about, that our grandmother was I don't know, polygamist or whatever. I'm making things up. And yeah, those those families that keep their polygamous grandmothers in the closet. So this interview that I did with Michael, it was from 2017, and I guess it wasn't that long ago, but things had tremendously changed in Michael's life between 2017 and the summer of 2020. And things had also really changed interpersonally with our family. Michael, I think, had really shifted, and there had been like a lot of forgiveness and healing between my brother and my parents. And the point of view he had in 2017, I think it would be a much more soft and forgiving narrative that we would get now. I'm not just saying that, you know, that really was a shift. I think anyone who is familiar with his work saw this shift. And I'm like a little, it's great that there's this conversation where Michael talks about his childhood and his experiences, but it's also, it just sucks he's not alive to talk about it now. You know, that's just always what it's going to come down to. I wanted to kind of also say that I was in a really different place in 2017. I had spent, you know, I went to private college in Boston, and then I, you know, I'd lived in Los Angeles for many, many years at that point. And I had spent a lot of time kind of building up like a persona, both kind of lying to myself and, you know, definitely only wanting to share certain information publicly about my childhood. And I had kind of had put a rose tinted glass over everything. And you can see there are moments in the conversation where we're kind of like butting heads. I feel like Michael and I now in life, it kind of like switched a bit, but I'm trying to like really push like, oh, but it wasn't that bad, or it was kind of nice. And Michael's definitely coming, you know, feeling very strongly differently about things. Also, you know, just to be completely transparent, when Michael's 7 years older than me, and when he was young, my parents were a lot less stable. And a huge defining difference of why my childhood was a little more stable than Michael's was because my family got housing assistance, Section 8. And that was a huge difference. And the reason I mentioned that is because that's just, I mean, obviously one day we would dream that there would just be beautiful public housing, and that's the norm. But while we fight to have that be our reality, I just always have to say, like, any sort of housing subsidy or housing assistance, we just need to keep fighting to make that the norm and accessible, just because the cost of living is impossible. Sorry, I've digressed. So yeah, I mean, there's also a couple of things I feel like now that Michael has passed away, and because of kind of who he had become in the last couple of years, and how significant his point of view, how important his point of view and his message had become to so many people around the world. I just want to also say that there are certain opinions Michael expresses that are just purely about himself. Like towards the end, he talks about not wanting to have kids unless he has like a lot of financial stability. I don't think Michael was in any way like saying if that wasn't someone's circumstance, they shouldn't have kids. That was just very much something he was just speaking. That was something he felt was important for himself. And, you know, it's, you know, none of us can speak for Michael. And then it's also a little weird to play something that's, you know, essentially 4 years out of date. Cause like I said, I think his political point of view had changed and evolved a lot. I think his spiritual point of view had changed and evolved a lot. And his relationships with my parents had definitely evolved and softened and grown a lot. But a lot of what's in that conversation is what Michael experienced. And I'm glad we have a record of him talking. I can't really stand myself in this recording, but I don't know if that's just me being insecure or critical, or if everyone just hates themselves when they listen back or watch back to something. But I I'm glad that there is a recording where Michael can speak so much from his own experience and what he went through during these times and his own recollection. I also think there's a bit of a challenging component to, Michael and I had this like strange childhood, and a lot of it had to do with just a very unusual family dynamic and unusual emotional dynamics and unusual psychological dynamics. And both he and I are not great at expressing it and are not great at like really communicating, intergenerational trauma and how that kind of like comes out and can just really impact your life. And so I think there are moments in the interview that I'm going to play between Michael and I from 2017 where things might seem a little vague, but I'm hoping that in the episodes to come, we can kind of paint a fuller picture. And also there can be more levity and joy because, especially in recent years, I feel like there were some really, really spectacular, happy moments. And I'm excited to celebrate all that Michael was able to accomplish in his brief and wondrous life, and also, get to talk and find out about what he had planned, and in some ways, hopefully put that out into the universe as projects that his friends and people he worked with will continue. All right. I think I've said my piece. I am a little nervous for you all to hear this. It's personal. I did edit out certain moments that were just really personal or just not really appropriate to share right now. And so there are a couple of weird edits. So don't come at me. Imagine the yeah. And then the other thing is there's no visual component. Like it was never a video. It was always just a recording. So for those of you who are watching, there's going to be some kind of like slideshow type images, but it's just audio. All right. Well, thanks so much for tuning in to episode 1. And I hope you, feel something, feel more at ease with who you are and your humanity. And feel a connection. I wouldn't say like, this isn't like a feel good episode. It's pretty heavy. But I think that, speaking openly and honestly about the conditions in which you grew up and the things you've gone through psychologically, I think it's just so important we do that because it's really alienating in our society to not hit the status quo and not be happy and super dopamined up. That's definitely a phrase. All right. I'm starting to get into the land of just babbling. All right. Here is Michael and I's interview from 2017.
Michael is my brother, Michael Brooks.
I
just cracked my ankle. It's disgusting.
Yeah.
And then I moved a glass, so I'm just adding to the noise problem. Michael, do you want to just intro yourself and just like quickly say what you do for work? And
I'm a Leo, Scorpio rising. It's an LA pod, right?
I was hoping that we could maybe have a few more listeners than just LA County.
No, fair enough. I'm a political analyst. I'm a host, entertainer. I co-host a show
You're
called...
You're a dancer.
I'm a dancer. Sort of like a cerebral magic Mike. That's definitely not true.
You should put that as your Instagram bio.
Yeah, it's not bad. I co-host a show called The Majority Report, which is a daily political talk show that's left-wing, progressive. I co-host another show called Two Dope Boys in a Podcast.
Which, not to throw shade, was named before Two Dope Queens.
Yes, to be clear.
Figured it was worth mentioning.
It is worth mentioning. And I, write articles for different places like The Baffler, Salon, Washington Post, and
And Breitbart.
And Breitbart News. I'm a major proponent of Breitbart. I was a early supporter of Donald Trump. It was really funny. I was at this party. It was about
It's you and the Mazers.
2 weeks before the election. And I was kind of like, I didn't want to go out that night. I was really tired, but it was my friend's birthday party, and I needed to and it was walkable, so you don't have that, like, you got it.
Yeah, I get it.
So I was there, and he introduced me to a person that I guess I'm kind of spoiling the end of the story, but it's still funny. We've become really good friends. Her name's TK, and she's a great host herself, and does a lot of community independent media work in Brooklyn. But he introduced us, and he said, hey, like, you guys both need to talk to each other because you both do podcasts and blah, blah, blah. And I was kind of like, I thought she looked cool and was happy to talk to her, but I was not excited to, like, talk shop. I really wanted to not talk about
You just wanted to
work.
dance.
I just wanted to dance. I just wanted to feel myself in my environment. And so she kind of, and I could tell that she also is like, oh my God, I don't want to, like, talk about work at midnight. And so she was asking about the shows I work on. I'm explaining, but I told her, I was telling her about Dope Boys first before, because majority, I guess, kind of gives it away. But, I said, I think Dope Boys is really distinct because my co-host Phil and I, like, he's black, I'm white, obviously. There's a little bit of an age gap between us.
I should have had you racially identify yourself.
Yes.
People might not know.
Yeah, just to be clear. And I was running through all this stuff, and she's kind of doing the, like, wow, like another fucking Brooklyn podcast where you talk about, like, sneaker culture. Great. And I said, I think another thing that's really distinct about us is that we're in our demos we're in, and we're really strong Trump supporters. And I looked at her like, I held the gaze. And what was great was that I had tried the same line a week earlier at a party, and the girl literally looked at me, and I guess I should be flattered. She looked at me, she's like, I believe you. Like, just straight up. But I looked at her, and I was like, oh, she believes me. And I thought it was really funny. But my friend, whose party it was, like, he doesn't have the same constitution I have. And what I noticed was that she kind of had made this split-second judgment of,
Wait,
like,
what do you mean? He could
he doesn't
maybe
have
run
the
in a
same.
circle
He
of-
wouldn't find the same humor in provoking.
Could have there been a Trump support at the party? Like, it was feasible?
No,
Okay.
definitely not. So she was looking at him like, how the fuck did you let alone introduce me to him? Why is he even here?
Yeah.
And I had to, like, move, and I literally put my hands, like, on her shoulders and got, like, eye contact.
So you assaulted her?
I assaulted her, and I said, I'm joking. I'm kidding. But it was like, it was great. And then actually, after that moment, she laughed really hard, and we became really good friends.
Wow.
Yeah.
And now he's our president. So that's what
Well, it was still a joke when it was
Yeah,
like, yeah,
now
it's
it-
probably
now it
not going to
just-
happen. But
not gonna land.
now this fucking
Well-
orange-faced game show asshole, sociopath, trust fund
And
baby,
there are-
sexual assaulters president.
There
Yes.
are a lot of orange game shows I think would be better.
Yep, like
There's
pretty
a long
much
list.
all of them, except for Chuck Woolery. He might be worse.
So, where did you grow up, Michael?
I grew up in Western Massachusetts. Was born in Bethesda, Maryland, and then the family came back to New York, to Brooklyn and Manhattan and Long Island for a little while. But basically, I was raised, I don't know how old I was when we got out to Western Mass. I don't know, 4, something like that. And that's where I grew up.
Do you have-
multiple places in that area.
And do you have memories prior to Western Mass of being little in New York
No,
or Bethesda?
I don't.
What brought your parents to Western Mass?
As far as I understand it, actually.
I guess I'll say our parents. There's no pretense.
Yeah, I was gonna say it was
Yeah,
a little odd.
and Mr. Brooks.
Is there something that you want to tell me? I think what the story was that there was some sort of job for our dad in Vermont, and
in what line of work? That's
I think
very
it was
general.
honestly like managing. I think it was managing a bed and breakfast. I want to say.
Oh, this rings a bell.
And they went there, and pretty much was like.
And Bob Durst owned the health food store next door.
No, there was that they didn't. They were like, oh, you have a kid, forget it.
Oh.
So the whole thing was thrown off, and then they just. I mean, I assume that because where we were, like Amherst and Northampton, were probably relatively known. They were like college towns, and they had a little bit of a reputation, so somehow they drove. But then, honestly, we ended up in a town where my first memories are, which was called Shelburne Falls. I have no idea how exactly they chose that place. I don't know.
I have a guess, but I could be wrong.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like that whole, like, Goenka meditation community.
Yeah, that might have been part of it.
Kind of had people that I feel like they sort of connected. Not that they were part of that world,
they
but
weren't
I feel
part
like
of it,
everyone
but
they knew was
there
kind of
was
in that,
some of that
bubble.
Yeah, it was like a little. I mean, and that was a really odd little place.
It was very conservative.
Literally, like a town of like maybe less than 1,000 people.
If anyone wants a visual reference, fun fact: Kate Winslet's Memorial Day, I think it was called. A movie was shot in Shelburne Falls. That's probably like the one pop culture.
Well, they had this weird
thing.
They had this amazing thing. They had potholes there, which were like is a really bad
roads?
name. No, but it was like this
hall.
incredible like.
It was a waterfall.
But it was like a massive complex of like areas you could swim in, but were also like natural rock formations.
Yeah, like the waterfall came down, and there were different. Like almost like natural hot tub type shaped holes, and some of them would go like really like 12 feet deep, and some of them were like very small, and you could like sit and swim in these different. Yeah,
it was pretty amazing,
holes.
and and that was like something people would travel for. I think eventually it got shut down because someone like got drunk and paralyzed themselves. I mean, I remember that. I actually do have memories of that, even as a kid, both jumping, and me too. Like, thank God. Super dangerous jumps, but that was pretty cool. And then, but yeah, I mean,
I just remember they were really dark, like when you'd swim in them because it was like so deep. And I remember I swam into a wall once and had like a really big bruise.
Damn.
So maybe it's for the best.
Maybe it's for the best. But they were cool. They were cool.
Okay, so you're growing up in Shelburne, and that's when you start having memories. Mm-hmm. What's life like in Shelburne Falls?
I mean, it's it's so weird to think about. Like, I'm 33, and I feel like
spoiler alert.
In some ways I've put some pretty good things together for myself, and I'm doing pretty well. But like, I don't think that I'm ready to have kids at all, right? Mm-hmm. Or maybe in some ways I am, but definitely not right now. So in some ways I just think of it, and I'm like, oh my God! Like, of course, our parents were in their 20s. They had no idea what the hell they were doing.
Mm-hmm. So were you cognitive of that as a kid, do you think?
Yes and no. I mean, I think
no one's parents know what they're doing.
I think
some people's parents kind of fake it.
Well, there are degrees. Yeah. But no, I think that I knew. I think that I was, in some ways, when I was really little, it was kind of like, oh, this is so cool because, I get to go to the tennis courts with my dad, and I get to go swimming, and.
I think what you need to explain is that you're homeschooled.
I was homeschooled, but I think even homeschooling, I realized, like, I should say that to people. I was homeschooled, but I think now people, because of how homeschooling, it used to be that people thought you were like a crazy religious person if you homeschooled, which we were not. But now I think some people homeschool now because their parents take academics way more seriously than if they went to school. And that definitely was not the case either. So I was just kind of like, I was just a free-range kid. I mean, there was just no structure, no rules, nothing. But on the other hand, where the rubber band snapped back was, and I did kind of notice pretty early on in my family, they were really poor. So, I think I noticed on some very basic things, like the heat being turned off or not having access to certain things. And, yes, when you're a kid, whatever you're experiencing you think is normal, but it certainly wasn't.
But was it a poor area? Like, I mean, from my retrospect, I thought of it as like pretty middle class.
Shelburne Falls?
Yeah.
Shelburne Falls
there were some people.
It had more poverty actually than probably other places.
That meets the eye.
Yeah, I mean,
because it's like a little idyllic downtown, right? I kind of just remember like the Bridge of Flowers or some restaurants.
There was, but no, there was a lot of. I mean, no, it was a poor. I mean, it was also a place that. I mean, this was probably good for the town. I mean, the place literally still had like a factory in it when we were there.
Yeah.
Where like real
Honestly,
dudes like went and did like serious, intense manual labor. I mean, it was a very, very, very blue collar place. It was not like people have an image in Massachusetts, I think, that's kind of like Harvard influenced outside of it. And maybe now they've seen the town or whatever, but Massachusetts has a lot of rural areas, and it has a lot of poverty, and it has a lot of working class people. So I don't know if it was super poor,
like
but it was very working
class. But my memories like were not like, now that I've traveled and seen lots of parts of the world and the country, I don't think back and think of Shelburne as like, oh, this really stuck out in terms of poverty.
Well, I was thinking of my situation.
Okay,
too.
but I was just trying to like paint the picture of like, you have like a little cute library, and like there's like flower, like there was.
I mean,
I know that you're experiencing
no, and I don't
deprivation, that doesn't.
Yeah, but it wasn't. It was definitely not a wealthy place by any stretch
No, but
yeah.
I guess I'm just trying to create an accurate picture, and it's like, because I guess my memories of it are like the houses and streets and flowers and like a good amount of vegetation and like the health food store and like walking over the bridge and like to the naked eye. It wasn't like, I'm trying to think. I remember there was like one house near us that I think had like a good amount of like kind of broken down junk in their yard, but
there was like a collection.
Yeah, but that's the only thing I can remember of like visibly.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, I was a lot younger. We left Shelburne.
Definitely a fair. I mean, there was everything. I mean, it gets boring for people, but no, there was a fair amount of rundown places. There was a lot.
Honey.
That's cool. There was a fair amount of rundown places.
Yeah,
there, but I'm sure.
But you were older.
I'm thinking in terms of my own, and yeah, I was older, and I also had like, you can even tell as a kid, like, because I was up there through like 7 and 8, so you could kind of tell like other kids who didn't have that much supervision, maybe weird stuff was going on at home. You can kind of.
But who were you comparing your circumstances to that you kind of were like, oh, this isn't how it should be?
I wasn't comparing it. I was just like, I can't get even like an ice cream cone. That sucks.
Right. And so, what were at the time, was mom teaching yoga or?
I think when we first got there, she worked briefly at the health food store.
Our parents met at a health food store. The one thing they agree on is health.
Fucking health food store.
Yeah, it's a big theory, a big theme.
Place.
I love health food stores.
I'm just kidding. I like that. Well, I don't love them. I like them. I think that, and then briefly, she was getting a master's to become a teacher, and then, for whatever reason, stopped that. I got to be honest. I do sometimes think with conversations like this, like, I mean, whatever, it's like, I'm sure there's some people that listen to and watch me or whatever that might find this interesting, and I've definitely become more open, at least about like the poverty part of my upbringing. But a part of me, especially when I think about, it could be my own grandiosity, but I'm like, whoa, if I go into politics or something, wow, it's just such a bizarre upbringing. But I woke up at 5 a.m. every day, and my family didn't have a lot, but we worked for everything we had.
No,
but it wasn't
you haven't like gone
into
into anything that way. So when you say I'm going to go into politics, it sounds so odd. It's like, well, so far nothing is that odd.
I get it.
Obviously, I'm being coy because I'm privy to family history, but I wasn't alive during this time.
But whatever. No, I think I don't really know exactly what they were doing to make a living. I don't know. I don't think about this phase that much. I mean, I think I'm sure that there's some stuff that happened that was very anxiety producing in terms of like, I think when you're a kid, having a sense that your life isn't stable is frightening. It produces a lot of resiliency, but it's also frightening. So I don't remember.
But you stayed in one house where like the house where I was born when you were 7
for a while. Yeah,
it was like the bottom floor of a house and there was the top floor of a house.
Yeah.
And you were there for like 4 or 5 years. Like, were you guys there for a while?
I don't know. Probably maybe 6 years. Probably.
So did you feel more stable being at one location, or it still felt very uncertain?
No. I mean, again, as I say, I think it just started with I have a memory of stuff, not of, again, like I say, like not being like, there wasn't like a couple dollars to get some groceries.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you remember like being hungry?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, actually, also much later on too. But yeah.
And so after that, they moved to Northfield.
Northfield.
Which kind of like a nicer version of.
I mean, no. I mean, Northfield had very little character.
Northfield was kind of boring, but had a very affluent private.
It had a
school.
feeling of being more kind of upscale, I guess.
But it was mostly just houses, right?
Just houses. There was barely like maybe 2 or 3 stores.
Yeah.
It was beautiful.
Yeah.
It definitely had much more of like a. There were some blocks in Northfield that you could, if you were just like making like. Like some generic movie about like a guy who like goes
Father
home.
of the Bride could be a like Massachusetts edition. Could have been in like one of those old Victorian houses. Maybe.
Yeah, they could shoot it. It was and we lived like a half block away from these like really gorgeous clay tennis courts, which are like actually like super unusual. There were definitely things that, and I wonder now. I mean, it's still a pretty isolated place, but I kind of wonder if like. That's a place that might have figured out some upscale real estate situations for itself. Because if you're, but on the other hand, it's cold, it's in the middle of nowhere, and there's nothing to do. But it was a lot more. Maybe it's like
a retirement place.
Yeah, if you could deal with the cold.
Some people don't mind it.
Yeah, some people don't mind the cold. But no, it was very upscale, and we, relatively upscale, and we lived. But it
was like living on First Avenue, looking over.
Yeah, it was like Central. It was like Park Avenue West. But no, Park Avenue South rather. But it was also, it was really boring.
Worth noting that both of our parents were raised like very solid middle class, if not like just like came from backgrounds where you owned houses and had jobs and had new cars. Like neither of them came from any form of like struggle.
No, they didn't. Well, I mean, I think mom at least is more working class, but not struggle, but working class.
You worked,
and then I think dad was between upper middle and middle.
Yeah.
And certainly, but I guess in dad's case, there was a lot of like. Because they were looking up, like our grandmother was always looking up, so she perceived where they were as like
not far
being terrible, but. Yeah,
I mean, she was raised, I think, maybe a little. I think
she
more
was raised
class.
pretty. I think she did. Yeah. She had a decently upper class upbringing, but they just. I think in mom's case, I think she was, politically of the belief, and they might, in some ways, they're not totally wrong, but like just this idea that like the system is collapsing, the environment is toxic. There's like. This isn't worth investing in, like they were really into, I know our mom was very political and she was interested in nuclear freeze and everything else. And then dad had not as political, but he also had the same kind of like, I mean, just things that like this was something I definitely noticed as I got older. Like, this is like a trivial example, but like, like a bunch of other people don't think that like microwaves will just like kill you on contact. Like I remember when I first was around microwaves as like a teenager, and if I went over like somebody's house, it would be like, you're gonna put that thing on? Like you might as well be like sticking your head in like a toxic waste reactor.
They both were a bit of conspiracy theorists to a degree.
I think to a degree, not conspiracy theorists in the sense that like they didn't believe in like secret society. Like they weren't like a lot of the crap that people believe in now, but they were definitely like, but they, but in some, they were very, especially dad, like, it's like if there was a mainstream narrative about something, it had to be wrong, and sometimes that's true, but sometimes that's not true. Right. And it was just a posture. So, I think in Northfield, I already had a sense that, like, this is kind of a bummer because I might like to have, like, an opportunity at, like, in some ways I was a normal kid. Like, I was good at sports. I liked pop culture. I didn't feel this
You had that poster of Lil' Kim.
That came a little later, but it was clearly very formidable influence on me. But, but I think, but then I had a phase where I was really interested in getting in trouble and pushing the limits.
Let's hold up for 1 second. I want to ask you about two things before you get there.
Sure.
One, they kind of, when I was born, did things change at all? Because you were 7. It's kind of like an interesting
terribly.
psychological time to have a sibling. Because you're very much an only child mentally.
As I recall, and I'm sure I was a little jerk to you sometimes, but I loved you. I don't remember being like having some big reaction, like, oh my God, my whole life is different.
Well, I
now.
just meant like they were already kind of being slightly negligent homeschoolers. Did that get worse when there was a baby? Like,
probably.
Did your education stop altogether? What was your education? I mean, at some point you obviously learned to read and write. Like, was that just mom
as a kid,
teaching
I was
you?
basically listening to the radio, and I had
And like NPR or like pop
everything,
music,
talk radio, NPR. I mean, I definitely already as a 7-8-year-old kid, I had some very precocious interests. I mean, I followed my first presidential election when I was, literally 7 years old. Right?
What election was that?
I think that was when Bill
Bush.
Clinton first ran for president in like '92.
Was that against Bush 1?
It was against
or
Bush
second
1, but I was really interested in the primary because this guy Jerry Brown, who's actually now governor of California,
very familiar.
was running for president to the left of Bill Clinton, and I just thought it was fascinating.
Oh, that's so cool. I didn't know that.
I just thought it was the most.
You were 7 years old?
I was either 7 or 8.
Wow.
Maybe.
And you were just listening to
No,
talking about
I was
it?
not. No, I was 8 because it was 91 was the primary, and I was born in 83. I just thought it was fascinating.
I was 1 year old. You would have been 8 years old, yeah.
It was the same thing though. Like I was obsessed with sports, so in some ways it was just like another competition.
You'd have like an avid.
It was another competition, but I remember because I definitely as a kid I would I had very grandiose like desires and thoughts even as a little kid. Whether it was I want to be the best tennis player in the world or whatever. And when I followed that election, I mean, I was like, I want to be the fucking president. This is amazing. And I was fascinated by it. So I didn't learn to read till much later. I learned to read well past when it's normal to learn how to read. But I always.
Do you think you had any learning disability?
I think that I had a lot of trouble sitting still. I think learning disability might be another thing that was like assumed onto me that I maybe didn't really have.
And that's our dad is probably diagnosably dyslexic.
Definitely, and there was an assumption that so as an example, I'm pretty sure I'm not. So I don't know. Like I don't think I'm dyslexic. I think that there's some things that
No, this was a thing that happened. There were some kids I went to a Waldorf school with, and people assumed they had learning disabilities, and then they went to public high school and they didn't.
Yeah,
it's like sometimes a strange it's like obviously this is so extreme, but it's like a very, 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 very teeny bit of like Munchausen.
Yeah.
By proxy.
No, it could have been.
It was like a tiny bit of like, everything that dad suffers from, you suffer from.
Oh, I think there was a lot of that.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say Munchausen.
No, that's what I'm saying. There's a scale from Munchausen to 0.
No, but there's a certain, if you're kind of narcissistically wrapped in yourself in a certain way, you can filter the whole experience of another person through your own experience, and there was a lot of that.
So how did you end up in public school in 5th grade?
I just wanted to go.
And they enrolled you?
They enrolled me.
How'd it go?
I got good grades for a while, but I was definitely not like, especially at that age. I mean, I was a total rule breaker, almost compulsively. Like if you told me I had to walk one way, I needed to walk another. I definitely had that kind of personality. And then also, what I think also, to some extent, even at that age, was that there wasn't an explanation to me of like
why we're doing what we're doing.
Yeah, like I think that if I had some sense of like, well, we're gonna sit here and do this boring thing now because it pays off in X.
If someone had explained that,
I might have. I don't know, but there was none of that. So I ended up, I did pretty well. I also wasn't ready for like the social dynamics.
Did you find kids to be mean, kids to be boring?
Well, I was
weren't really
in and out
socialized.
of the popular group.
Yeah.
So I was partially in because again I was like good at sports. Like I would make the cut for teams and stuff, which is a big you know, even in that little stupid world, that was like very important. And I kind of knew, even though our parents wouldn't really invest in it, I had a sense of like getting kind of the right clothes. But I didn't, yeah, I mean, I was not, I'm sure I was weird relative to them. I don't remember exactly how, but I'm totally sure
probably
I was.
Like the food you brought was weird.
Food I brought, I probably didn't know all of the cues of like how to be cool and when to not say stuff and when to say stuff. So, you know, I mean, I was really, as I say, it was weird because some kids were just like out and I wasn't like out, but I was like in.
You were still in the closet.
I was in and out. Yeah, I was still in the closet. No, I'm just being like,
no,
some kids were never invited to anything, but by the end of it, I mean,
so when
kids were, you know.
What was the fire alarm incident at the end of it?
Oh, when I pulled the fire alarm?
Yeah, and why did you pull the fire alarm?
Is this something that really needs to be? I mean, I pulled the fire alarm because it was there to pull. I mean, that's honestly like I was that kind of kid for a while. I mean, I think like a lot of parts of my personality I burn really intensely, so I kind of like, you know, this is jumping ahead, but by the time I'm 15, 16, I mean, I still had a lot of stuff to deal with and it was very stressful, but if you met me as like an adult, you might think like, whoa, this kid is like too serious. Like, you know, he's meditating, he's doing yoga, he's reading Castro biographies, like go have some fun, you know? But between like the ages of like 11 and 14, I mean, I was, yeah, in different ways, but I was a bad kid. And so
Do you think the fire alarm was the beginning?
No, I was already kind of thinking about stretching rules.
Did you get kicked out of the school after you did that?
I didn't get kicked out, but I remember that I didn't want to go back. And
what was the education board like? Were they worried about your education at home? Like, after that year, was there more like scrutiny on how you're being educated?
No, there was very.
I thought that they were supposed to be like.
No, I would just go and give them like examples of. I mean, it was not very overseen at all.
So it's pretty easy to homeschool casually in America.
Apparently, where we grew up, it was.
It was, which is a pretty academic, intense state.
Well, but yeah, I mean, the areas where we were not like
doesn't
super
really matter.
on top of it.
Okay, so then I remember that time being by no means comfortable or cushy, but pretty. Like I remember the heat going off a couple times, and like a couple times where there wasn't much food, but overall, it would seem like pretty okay years there. There's some ups and downs, but I feel like there were some stretches of.
Yeah, it wasn't just that. I mean,
I remember you started, and this is when you started going to Northampton, Amherst, and hanging out with kids that were like gang affiliated. Like, how'd you get there? Did you take a bus?
Well, I guess the one thing that they did that was kind of proactive was they got me. There was like this program that was being designed for homeschoolers as like some type of.
I mean, at this time you're 12, 13 years old.
Yeah.
Like your education really is kind of having to like they had to get serious.
Yeah, they were starting to somewhat get serious, but so there was a thing called Pathfinder, which it's been renamed and it still exists. I think.
Is it?
It's North Star or something.
Yeah.
So it was like it was basically two teachers quit teaching public school and they set up like a kind of like a program where you could go in and take classes and hang out, and then also they would support you in doing internships and stuff. And I was there for about a year, and yeah, I mean, I definitely took that time to, you know, in the grand scheme of things, it's Amherst, Massachusetts, so it wasn't like, you know, I wasn't hanging out with any kids that were really any great, big, dangerous people.
But they were
but
like
at the same time, no, they were kids who were like.
And you met them
the
through
cousin.
the homeschool.
They were like the kids who like they might be the cousin of a 20-year-old who might actually like. Be involved in something.
Larger amounts of drugs from someone in Springfield and like funneling them.
Probably more like Lowell or something.
Okay.
There was a big. The
but
reality
how did you meet
was
those kids? Were they
hanging out?
You were just hanging out like in Amherst after school.
Yeah, I'd go and.
Amherst is known for Amherst College and UMass. It's like a little college.
But there was
town.
a towny scene.
Yeah,
there was a place where a lot
is.
of kids would hang out and buy weed and smoke cigarettes and shoplift, and most of those kids were like me. They were just kind of like punks, but there was a handful of kids that were, and I don't really know what happened to it. Like, it's clearly not there anymore, but like, there was a kid at UMass who got shot in a drug deal. There was this like,
well, in the
there was a
early
contingent
90s.
of Cambodian kids,
yeah,
who, like, Amherst helped host families that were fleeing the killing fields, which was great, and then a small handful of some of these Cambodian kids, there is like a real Cambodian gang network. So some of them in Amherst were actually affiliated with some of these groups, and they actually did have like names and different tats and stuff like that. So 2 of the kids I hung out with were actually in that zone. Like, we played basketball, they take their shirts off, and they were like 15-year-old kids. They had homemade tattoos all over their bodies and stuff. So that was a group of kids that I knew being around was like, oh, like, again, I don't want to exaggerate it, but it was like it was the difference between, hey, I'm going to go shoplift a shirt, or I'm going to go get high, which is what I was doing, versus like, well, maybe we'll steal a car, or maybe we'll get into a real physical conflict with somebody, or maybe we know somebody who knows somebody who has a gun. So I don't want to exaggerate my personal involvement, but it was like with those kids.
But you were young. You were like 13.
I was 13, and I was definitely starting to swim around things that I guess in a weird way I was equipped to deal with, and whatever. I had a lot of anger, and I had a lot of, and I'm sure also as a 13-year-old kid, I mean, I didn't even, I'm still.
13-year-old boys always gravitate towards thinking, not always, but like there is this it's very glamorized in our pop culture.
And I was fascinated by that stuff, so I'd read books about gangsters, I'd listen to gangster music, and then I'd,
Did you ever steal a car?
I guess technically I did, but
really?
I didn't count it. Yes.
I didn't know that. You were like there when they hotwired it?
Yeah, I mean, something like that. I didn't steal a car.
No, you mentioned car stealing.
No, I'm saying no. They were when they started really escalating. I don't know what happened, but I had a period of time close to my 14th birthday where I realized that I didn't want to be around these kids anymore. Was it when your friend
got jumped and you were supposed to testify?
Oh, we're really going to talk about that?
Do you not want to talk about it?
I could talk about it, but it's a different way.
Okay.
That's not how it happens.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, I mean,
because, we don't have to get the details, but essentially there was something you witnessed and they wanted you to testify against these kids.
Yeah, this kid wasn't my friend.
Okay.
And I was walking with him somewhere, and he had drugs on him, basically. And these kids who I had stopped hanging out with, they saw me and they came up to me, and they were nice, but they gave the kind of like, so where the fuck have you been kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I kind of, I caught up with them, and we gave hugs and all of that.
Yeah.
And I told this kid that I was walking with, kind of out of the corner of my mouth, because we were basically just going to go smoke weed and, and wherever we were going. And I said, look, I know these guys. I'm going to turn around and leave.
Yeah.
And I would not,
keep hanging.
Or even just walk where you're walking, because they're going to follow you. I have no doubt that they'll follow you and they'll rob you. Zero doubt. So I'm going to turn around, and you should do that too. And he had no, I'll go where I want. And so I left.
Oh, wow. So were you heading out of town, and then you're and then cross the street and went back into town?
It was I think what it was we were walking out of town past the middle school or the high school or something, and then past the high school there was some woods or something where we would go. Because this was the indignity of smoking pot as a middle schooler. You had to, find little patches.
It was also illegal then,
and it was legit.
It has changed.
That was the thing too, is that you actually were
really not. You could get in trouble for having a gram of weed.
Like you could, if a lot of times police might be nice about it, but they could if they chose. You could get 40 hours of community service and a record and a trial.
This is late 90s or
late
early
90s,
2000s.
something late 90s. But anyways,
you basically looped back. You double back. You didn't go.
I just turned around and walked back.
Yeah.
And they ended up beating him up and robbing him. I think they broke his jaw.
God. You just knew.
It was just
obvious. So you.
I mean, that was even at that.
Did you witness them beat people before?
No, one kid, yeah.
So you'd seen this. You knew it was
and
a
they
thing.
talked about it a lot. One of them told me if I wanted to keep hanging out with them that I had to put somebody in a hospital. And I mean, I have to say, I did not even at my worst want to put anybody in a hospital, and I did not have the physicality as a 13-year-old to put somebody in a hospital.
Holy shit! So this kid got fucked up.
Yeah, they hurt. I mean, he was okay, but.
I mean, break someone's jaw, definitely not.
I think they broke his. If I recall correctly, they broke his jaw. They didn't.
So then,
they hurt him.
How did the police find out that you were a witness, or
I wasn't really a witness.
that you were in the proximity before this happened? He must have told them.
I think he probably told them. I don't even remember.
Did he think you set him up?
I have no idea. I actually just remember that it was really disgusting because. Yeah. There was this contingent of even adults kind of having this whole you can testify and walk with your head held high and the community will protect you. And meanwhile it was these kids were they would stop me on the street and be like, you're not saying anything right. And I had read about different cases where people's houses gotten burned. I mean, I had this massive, I don't know where it came from, but I had this about you specifically, this idea of they could hurt my little sister and then it would be my fault, and I just felt so guilty.
Did they ever see us together in town or something? Is that where that fear came from?
Well, what really terrified me was that we at this point had moved to Leeds, and Leeds was kind of off the beaten path, but they would come to Leeds.
And
that was whoa, because the truth is, it's not like they're that sophisticated. You know what I mean? It's not like they could find a street address.
Right.
But if they happen to walk by literally where I live, then they could fucking throw rocks through windows. They would do stuff like that for sure. They would slash tires. They would throw rocks through windows. And I also was really, in this other way, I was pissed because I thought that this kid that got robbed was just a brat. I told him, I was like, dude, you're going to get.
He didn't listen to you.
And he was just this entitled, he really had kind of fuck them, I'm going to do what I want. And I was like, this isn't what life is.
Yeah.
You're going in it. This isn't a what things should be or not be situation.
Right.
You're going to get fucked up and you're going to get your stuff taken.
So if I recall correctly, Mom and Dad really, really stood up for you not testifying.
Well, what happened was that and then the other thing was that the cops lied. So this cop came to the house and basically said to us that he was going to basically just show me a yearbook from the school. And if I pointed to the kids that did it, that basically they could take my information, they wouldn't use my name, and they wouldn't call on me to testify.
Yeah.
And they used my name, and they wanted me to testify. So completely lied.
They used your name in court in front of these kids?
Yeah.
So the kids knew that you said something?
I don't actually know at the end of the day what they knew, because the bottom line was that I didn't show up to testify.
And
so so ironically, I would tell them, I'm not saying anything. I'm not going to be there. And I wasn't there.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. And I know that they...
But Mom, this seems like maybe a juncture where Mom and Dad had your back and
Oh, yeah.
Because I think the police threatened to arrest them.
They did. They totally had
and they really were no, he's not going to testify.
Yeah, they had my back on that for sure. So there were things that they understood. One of the things that would be good about them is that they definitely had, they didn't have, they weren't, you know, they weren't rule followers in a certain way. So they didn't have, so as soon as the cop lied,
they were like, no,
then
we're
it
not
was
doing
like,
this.
yeah, then it was like, well, fuck that.
How did you, like, how did this kind of chapter of rule breaking and kind of being adjacent to these kinds of people,
right?
Like, how did that end? Like, what was the shift there? Well, this kind of court incident must have sort of been like the death nail in it.
Well, it was
I know you were already not really hanging out with them.
Yeah, I was already kind of. No.
So how'd you stop?
Well, then I had like a phase after that. What I would say was kind of like my hippie phase. Mm-hmm. I got really into reading. I was very interested in the world, but I was still really getting high a lot. And in retrospect, I think that was just purely.
Where'd you get money for weed?
I didn't.
You just hung out with people, smoked weed, and get high, yeah.
You know, smoked out, whatever. That's not great for your social capital, though, to be the guy who never throws down.
Yeah.
But whatever. And, you know, I got high in other ways, too. You know, I mean, one time, there was a period of time where I would steal, like, you know, like cold medicine and, you know, trip on cold medicine. And it was really...
Road tripping's rough.
Yeah, it was terrible. But it was a serious high. And...
that was definitely a thing.
Yeah,
where we grew up.
That was a thing.
Yeah.
And I, you know, and I drank a lot. I mean, I was a really unhappy kid. And it wasn't, you know, situation wasn't good. And I did some hallucinogens and stuff. But as I say, I really got, you know, my mentality kind of shifted from this kind of gangster thing to this, or, you know, whatever that, I mean, that's ludicrous. Not an actual gangster thing, but you know what I'm saying? To kind of reading, like, you know, I was really into reading the beats. And I started writing poetry, and I started...
Yeah, I remember you did some slam poetry stuff, right?
Yeah, I would go to readings.
Yeah.
I mean, I started...
But did you perform?
Yeah, I performed.
Yeah, I remember you
did a
performing.
little bit of public reading. But I got fascinated by Eastern religion. And I don't totally know where that came from. Like, I know Mom taught yoga, and I know that there were some books that were around like that, but they weren't, like, super into that stuff.
They had friends that were into that stuff always.
Yeah.
Like, we always had family friends that were part of, like, the IMS world and the Goenka world.
Yeah. So,
like, that was very prevalent with the people who had their shit a little bit more together, I would say.
Yes.
Were the families in those communities.
Yes, they had
that we knew.
They had
not 100%.
No, I know what you mean. I think you're right. So I had
so maybe subconsciously that was the
maybe, but I was just I mean, genuinely, it really was fascinating to me. I think partially, I think it was also like I do have spiritual interests, and I also, you know, it's philosophically compelling, and I think that also I always had a big appetite. Like, I wanted to be in a bigger world, in a bigger stage. So I think it was also an opportunity to read about different parts of the world and different ways of looking at things. That always kind of fascinated me. And another thing, you know, to their credit, Mom in particular kind of saw the opportunity of, like, well, if he's interested in this stuff, maybe he'll, you know, try to meditate.
Is she who sent you to IMS, or
I don't remember exactly how
IMS
that
is a Buddhist meditation community in Western Mass or Eastern Mass, kind of mid Mass.
Like mid Mass, and so I went on the team, and the day before I went on my first team meditation retreat, I tripped on mushrooms, and I freaked out. I thought like the CIA was going to come kill me. And then, because I was watching the movie JFK by Oliver Stone.
So like your subconscious was
I thought
dark.
that the movie was part of the conspiracy theory. Part of the conspiracy. And then, and then I went and I that, whatever it was about that 4-day meditation retreat, I don't really exactly know why it had such a big impact on me, but...
Because you sat and you were present with yourself and you, like, learned how to...
No, that's true, but now in retrospect, like, I know a lot of other... I think everybody I knew had a very powerful experience, but I think a lot of other kids... You know, like, I did that retreat. I came back and I pretty much stopped doing drugs entirely and, like, meditating for an hour a day. And I don't think that's, you know, that's not
I think you
normal.
were, it's weird to, like, have a bit of an objective view on it, which I probably never have because you've always just my older brother. I'm like, oh, he did this and he did this. But listening to you talk, it seems like you were kind of searching really desperately from a very young age for what that was. You were looking for something that made you feel grounded and safe and, like, satiated you emotionally. and mentally, and it seems like you found that.
Yeah, so that...
Do you still meditate a lot?
Not nearly as I do.
Yeah.
I do a different kind of practice now, but
And were you did you transfer into the performing arts high school at some point in all this?
Yeah, I started taking classes at the performing arts school, and it was still, I mean, at this point I guess what had shifted was that I already was, I was a really big, at this point, I mean, it was just a massive reader and digester of information, which definitely, it helps me do what I do now. All I knew was that, like, I wanted to go to a, quote unquote, good college, right?
Which you did.
Which I eventually figured out how to do.
What was briefly, what was the journey to getting into a school, and like how did homeschooling and all that?
I mean, that was really fucking complicated. I mean, how did that happen?
I mean, you managed to kind of go via PVPA and Plaintree, which is like the homeschooling portion of PVPA.
But I applied as I had gone back fully to homeschooling.
I didn't know that.
I failed too many classes at PVPA. Like, it was not going to be like...
Because you just didn't have, like, I hadn't been trained to show up and do it.
Yeah, and I think, and I also, I don't know what the deal with math was. I really don't. Like, I don't know, honestly.
You probably just young enough didn't learn the basic skills, so that when you were in, like, algebra and geometry, you didn't know, like,
I just didn't
the
know
more basic shit.
Yeah, it was really... And also, like, there was other things, too, that, like, in retrospect were just, like... Like, it was already a time where, like, I actually did not really have the resources that, like, they were already kind of expecting you to do a little bit of stuff on the internet and have, like, computer. Like, I basically... I kind of made the calculation that if I went back fully to homeschooling and positioned myself first and foremost as a homeschooler who took courses at PVPA,
and you came up with that strategy.
Yeah,
that
it would
savvy.
make my application different. And then the other thing that happened, I probably had 4 or 5 classes, probably 6 or 7 classes. 4 teachers let me make them up and give me full credit and just fixed it. Then there was one that I couldn't because, like, I don't think she wasn't even there anymore. No.
I think she had a baby or something.
And she was and she wouldn't have helped me anyway. She sucked. And then also Benigno.
Benigno didn't let you do it?
Benigno didn't let me do... He let me do one, but he wouldn't let me do the other. And it was weird because that totally destroyed my relationship with him.
Yeah.
I was done.
I wonder why he did that.
He had some...
They think that they thought it was more important for you to learn this lesson.
Some bullshit. And it's just such fucking nonsense because it's like...
They didn't look at the situation.
Yeah,
They were acting like it was a normal situation.
And it's also like, what do you mean learn I'm not going to learn any lesson if I don't get out of here and go to good college. Like, fuck you.
You got into Bennington.
I got into Bennington, and Bennington wasn't the end goal, so I did a year there and then I transferred to Bates. Which kind of like
ironically, one of the teachers that wouldn't let you fulfill the benchmark. And then 7 years later, I went to the same high school and I marched in. I announced that my brother was at Bates, and this teacher shit himself.
Was he honestly, like, it was funny comedy wise that he was pissed, or was he like happy?
I think he was kind of chagrined.
He was chagrined. Yeah.
I think he was like, well, I'll be damned.
What a piece of shit.
I don't think he was angry, and I don't think he was shocked. I think he was like, because, I think some people are rule followers, and I think Gary's a huge rule follower.
He is, but you know what? I gotta say, like, he sat down with me one time, and he said, "You're the best red student I've ever had." And also, like, I was amazing in his class. I don't even remember what the fucking issue was and why I didn't pass it. And there was just...
He probably didn't do his 2-page essay on, like... Work hard, you will succeed is like a theory, and like why it doesn't apply to minority.
Like, the fact that he didn't ask himself, like, this kid actually is like relatively respectful.
Yeah.
He's clearly not just like fucking off.
Yeah.
He's really smart. Like, what the hell's going on? There were a lot of people that kind of...
I think teachers just don't have the bandwidth, and sometimes they make really big mistakes.
Yeah.
I think the truth is they're not paid great.
Right, that's
Tons
true.
of kids are going through the system, and they mess up.
That's true. That's a good point.
That's what I chalk it up to. I don't think he was like a malicious asshole. I mean, there are people who are vindictive.
No, I know.
He has a little vindictive.
Yeah.
In his personality, he was always that way.
Right.
I remember he would call and people would be like, what are you talking about? Like, how could you think that?
Right.
And like when someone was like, the March of Tears, what are you thinking? Sorry. Okay. So you went to, he loved me. You went you left a legacy behind. You went to Bates.
I went to Bates. I studied international relations.
Moved to New York.
I studied in Turkey, spent time in the Middle East.
Yeah. Started traveling.
Travel. I still cannot wait to travel more.
Yeah.
Yes. It's up to me. I'd be in a plane like once a month.
So you went to Bates, graduated. Yeah. Okay, now we can go back. So do you remember your first word?
I don't.
Okay. I don't either. I don't think our parents really.
Yeah, I don't think
that wasn't a thing for them.
I had a thing that I thought it was the F word, but I don't remember. I don't think
that's
so.
funny.
Yeah.
When you were little, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Oh, I wanted to be a tennis star, basketball star, movie star, and president.
President star.
Yes. President star.
What's your first memory?
I don't know.
How did your parents pick your name?
I know that it was Archangel Michael. They liked it, and then I think my middle name Jamal, which gets a lot of interest, was our mother's friend had a kid named Jamal that she thought was a sweet kid, and she just picked it up from that.
And she infuriated the Jewish grandparents.
Right. I think that sealed the deal. No,
you could have been like Yoshi Rain.
Oh my God.
You know, and then that would have just ruined everything.
The fact that they gave me a name that like I can
people
work
could like
with,
read.
Yes, was like, or just even like
not that Yoshi's not a nice name.
Look on the other hand, like I mean, obviously now it's just even a whole other level of awful, but like, you know, part of what fucked Anthony Weiner up in the beginning is just the name.
Yeah.
The idea that like Michael Brooks is doing something is less innately enticing.
It's not as fun of a headline.
Yeah.
Anthony Weiner, sending pictures of his wiener is,
right,
you know, just in the DNA of the name. Okay, this is actually a really fun question for me to ask you. Yes. You might not have an answer. Is there a book, song, movie, TV show that you watch and there was something in it that you're like, oh, this reminds me of my parents or my household growing up? Or
in different ways and not linearly, but well, I mean, what's that movie that was really good? I can always forget the name of it, but there's the Viggo Mortensen movie. Something Superman.
Oh, Mr. Captain America or Mr. America, the guy with the homeschooling out of the woods.
Yeah, I mean, obviously part of that. Captain Fantastic.
Captain Fantastic.
Is that it?
I think so. I'm gonna Google it just.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, obviously there was a dimension of that, although his level of like seriousness in politics not at all, but the idea of the homeschooling and having a parallel world where like eating out of a plastic container is like you might as well just like let your kid get like abducted. That was similar. I don't know why, because it really is quite different, but there's elements of like the About a Boy situation.
With Toni Collette.
Toni Collette. Maybe just because like the kid gets bad clothes.
Was that something you were self-conscious about?
Oh God, yeah. I mean, again, because for whatever reason, you and I don't like a lot of the kids when I was at the homeschool place were like very. It was kind of like, I mean, some of them were great, but they were very much like, you just couldn't imagine them in anything that would be quote unquote normal, in ways that were good and bad. You
couldn't imagine them in anything that could be normal. What do you mean?
Like they were just very
weird kids.
They were unusual kids, and I think freaks, losers, pathetic.
No, but they were like kids that were like hyper intelligent and really good at astrology, but couldn't really. I remember them like I remember their potlucks. They'd wear like a lot of intense goth and like
So even for me, like even when I didn't know the cues and were unusual, I still had like
a sense.
I wanted to know what the popular music was. I wanted to know how to dress. I wanted to know, and I also was very, I was like, I always wanted credibility with mainstream culture. I still do.
Yeah.
And I think, that was always important to me, to kind of be able to move. And what's that changed to now is now it's like, now the goal is to be able to like just move in any environment effectively. And I think that is actually ironically a benefit of my childhood, because I had to deal with so much insanity.
Made you kind of like a chameleon.
I don't like chameleon really does imply that you have like no center.
Okay,
and you just
so
kind of
like
like
a rigid chameleon with a spine of steel.
Rigid chameleon. No, I actually think that through being yourself, you can, if you're genuinely comfortable in your own skin, that's how you get comfortable with lots of different kinds of people and lots of different kinds of circumstances. It was stressful enough to be poor, and it was stressful enough to be unstable, and it was stressful enough to, constantly move and everything else. But then to also have to have the whole story that was so important to him, that like everything was actually great and this was actually the way things should be. And that as soon as I was, because by the time I was even 14, 13 years old, I was already kind of like, this does not make any sense.
Yeah,
and I was right. And that's a really disconcerting experience. It's very weird when, like, because Dad, would do like the whole, when you're older, you'll understand line. And usually when an adult says that, even if they're like missing something and they're wrong, and even though it's actually kind of a stupid thing to say in general,
you get it.
There's something that's just kind of like, yeah, you're probably right. I can look back at myself and my, as a 18-year-old and say, hey, you're missing this. But he would say that, in service of like, this is why I'm not supporting you in studying to go to college or paper for Bates while you're on a week-long break because you should be helping me with my business.
Yes.
Which didn't exist. Like, that also became kind of, upsetting too, because it was like, I don't know about all, Dad could spin a million fantasies about making $1 billion or doing whatever, but I was already at the point where like, no, I really want to have like a successful life. Yeah. And I know that this is like something that actually can be done.
Yeah.
And I probably reacted too much against, like, I was so scared that all I saw was like go to a good college and like work in finance or something, which I wasn't cut out to do either. But I mean, or, I don't want to say that, but it wasn't the right path for me. But like, it was like either total fantasy, or actually, when the conversation got real, it could be very discouraging.
I'm really sorry that
I thought that it's been, it set the template for a lot of stuff that I've had to work on in my life.
Yeah.
In terms of work, in terms of relationships, in terms of everything else. But I think that, like, something that a lot of people, some of the people that I've worked with who are more like, I don't know, coaches or whatever, have been, it's not like I'm just amazing and my personality's great and whatever, but there is a big element that, like, I don't know, I came in with, as you did too, that's the other kind of funny thing about our parents, is like they produced really interesting kids, but like I came in with a lot of attributes. Like I wasn't necessarily someone who had to like really struggle and be like a problem, right? Like I innately, things are pretty good. And that's also why, on the other hand, I've gotten so many breaks and had so many people who've wanted to help me and have put things together. But
I mean, you're too in it to see it, but you've moved to New York City and you're making a name for yourself and you're respected in your field and you do really important work. Like, you have made it. You will continue to make it, but despite all, even just from that moment where you're like, okay, fuck the transcript, we're going to package me as like a full homeschooler, like that moment was the defining moment of just shifting out and doing it.
Well, I knew that, I
know that you knew
that.
No
choice. But it's been a lot of degrees. But it's also just honestly like day in and day out, like my perception of myself versus like what am I perceiving that's actually me and what I actually think and what I actually experience versus like what the expectation set was around me.
So how are you going to raise your kids?
I mean, do you really think I'm going to have kids?
Well, do you want kids?
I'm actually curious. I mean, do you think I'll have kids?
I think if you end up with the right spouse, you will.
Right.
I don't think that it's like you would ever. I don't think you would settle for being with someone that you didn't like.
Right.
Think like I'm that into, but they'd be a good mom. I don't think kids are that
No.
important to you. But is that true? If you're with someone that you thought was just great and you guys had a great partnership and they didn't want kids, you could like handle having a few dogs instead?
I guess so. I mean, I think about that. No, but I think if I had
You
kids,
think about having dogs instead?
I think if yeah. I know, but I'm open to having a kid.
Are you worried that you'll raise like a really like boring kid?
No, because I think that at least now I'm already past like. I definitely had a time like in my 20s where if I thought about it, it would be like, all right, and then they're gonna go to the exact right pre-prep school, and then they're gonna go here, and then they're gonna do that, and then they're gonna be trained for that, and then they're gonna go to Harvard, and then, and that's the other paradox is that, I mean, clearly I'm not happy with a lot of things I dealt with, but at the same time, like, there's no doubt that, like, if I just even visually, like how I look, if I was like raised in like an upper middle class Massachusetts family, I went to nice schools, it's like...
You'd probably be a rapist.
I don't know if I would be that bad, but I'm just saying, like, obviously the way that from the work I do to the comedy to this sort of like...
You wouldn't have the
sense of like empathy. I think it's a worldview. I also think it's like just a way of being in the world, and that kind of versatility and adaptability. Part of it is, part of it's my personality, but obviously it's also majorly accentuated because of how I grew up and what I dealt with. So if I had a kid, the real trick would be like, I don't want them to ever feel a sense of lack or poverty or, I would not have a kid without my finances being totally taken care of. I would want them to feel really confident, give them a sense of a lot of opportunity, but then at the same time, it actually would be like, well, how do you inbuild, like, not bad or negative, but like uneven experiences so that you're producing a genuinely dynamic and interesting person? That's super important.
It's a AJ Tony Soprano story. No,
I mean, to some extent, like, I don't even like. To me, it's like, even my version of like making a lot of money and being good is not like,
owning MGM.
I don't picture. And I also don't have I don't have like a hard on for like Bel Air or Westchester or whatever. Like, I would imagine I'll raise a kid in a city and they'll visit Western Mass, whatever. But I do think about, like, what is it that, even like the Kennedys, for all of like how fucked up that family is in some ways, what was it among some of them? Like, some of them kept the charisma, some of them got a sense of social justice. I don't know what that is. And in a smaller version for me, I really would be seriously thinking about, like, what makes a person interesting and have depth. So how do you balance privilege with that? Yeah. That's super important. And certainly in my life, I mean, I'm mostly drawn to people that are, that are either self-made people or, I've had some people that have kind of been born into good things, but they, it doesn't rub their personalities in the wrong way.
All right, well, I think we got it. All right, love you.
This is going to be like a love you too, Lee.
Well, you want to finish your thought?
No. I thought this was going to be like a fun romp around memory lane.
No. What fun memories do you have?
No, fuck you.
Did I not?